and welcome back to another episode of Conversations, the space where we get to explore new ideas through conversation instead of necessarily going to a specific destination. We're all here to explore today. So bring your exploration caps and get into the conversation. So as you can see, there are two of us who are here live for you today. But this is not just a conversation for the two of us. This is a conversation for all of us. So if you're new to the show, welcome. If you're not new to the show, welcome. We really encourage you to get into the conversation, share your questions, share your perspectives, share your experiences, because that is what makes the exploration more diverse for all of us. So we have a conversation that is very close to my heart today because we're talking about marketing. And for those of you who know me, you know that I have a weird relationship with marketing. While I believe in the power of connection and storytelling and solving problems and sharing how we can solve problems, there's a lot in the marketing industry that distracts us from that. And there's a lot of things that don't actually help us go down the path. So we're going to explore some of those things today, some of those mindsets that are helpful or not helpful in the conversation about marketing, not just to do marketing, but marketing that matters. And to have this conversation with me, I have the lovely Lynn Rivest. So Lynn, can you introduce yourself to our crew today and let them know a little bit about who you are and why you care about talking about marketing that matters?
Yeah, let me try to make this quick. I posted this actually when I posted about the event that I called myself a reluctant marketer. So I fell into it, not knowing what the heck I wanted to do when I grew up. But I was really interested in the up and coming, interactive multimedia world. This was back in the late 90s. That's what they called it back then. And learned everything to do with what was digital at the time. So HTML, authoring CDs and Macromedia. Flash was brand new. I don't know where Flash went, but that was like the most exciting thing back then. Anyway, I did that course and I ended up being a web developer early on, and then quickly moved into project management, into account management, and then was just like a digital strategist and marketer for, 18 years or so in the corporate world. And then I left to work with people in their online businesses, doing online business management and strategy. And so I've worked with, hundreds at this point, with hundreds of founders and entrepreneurs in their online businesses. And in 2021, I started to do it more as an advisor. And now I specialize in helping midlife professionals who kind of think retirement is a stupid concept. And also, our generations really were not necessarily all ready for retirement, even monetarily, and they're ready to be their own boss. And so I can guide with one-on-one support to help them build that business, not by themselves, because it can be hard to do on your own. So that's the crux of it. Hopefully I didn't go too long.
No, that was great. And this is a conversation. Sometimes there are long parts, sometimes there are short parts. Just how it goes. And so, Lynn, with your marketing knowledge in this transition to working with entrepreneurs and people who are building their own business because they think retirement is dumb. I'm on that train, by the way. Like, if you're doing something that feels meaningful for you, why would you want to retire? Like, how big of a struggle is marketing for a lot of these people?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Marketing's a struggle for anybody who thinks deeply. This is going to sound like I think most people don't think deeply, but there's different, ranges. And by the time you're at midlife, by the time, you do tend to look at things maybe from a broader perspective, from all the experience you've had. You dissect things a little more. So it's harder because you can't dismiss what we do when we're younger. Sometimes it doesn't feel so right, but you're like, oh, but the friends are doing it, and it's a cool skirt and I want it and I don't care how they sold it to me. Like, you don't even think about it that much. But that starts to whittle down, like it starts to erode as you get older. If you ever question things, in your life, it just starts to get deeper and deeper. So yeah, it's hard because many of the practices of marketing, which I know we agree on this, um, play on our biases, play on the things that are hard for us to not fall into the trap of. And even when we know about them and when we're clear, we still do them. And there's just something so weird about being part of that, being the person who's perpetuating that. So yeah, it's hard in that way. That's a little more philosophical, but yeah.
Well, I love a good philosophical conversation. And I think this is interesting because this is one of the reasons why I too see people who struggle on social media or what have you, because they think that it has to be done this way and this way doesn't feel good. So then we can't really get behind it. And this is not just a problem for entrepreneurs either. I see this in marketing teams who are receiving instruction to do something a specific way. I've seen it in sales too, where sales teams try to hard code how you use LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
And you're like, but that's not really a thing.
Yeah.
Because no two humans will actually use a tool identically unless they're instructed to do so. And so when we look at this from a marketing mindset perspective, what are some of the things we need to change our thoughts around in marketing to make that shift from yeah, it's just a thing that I'm uncomfortable with, and it will always be a thing that I will be uncomfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, geez, the big thing I say a lot is that humans don't scale. We've tried to. The global village was, a nice idea. And it's not that doesn't mean we don't care about people in other places. But what I mean by that is that that Dunbar's number, that 150 connections that we can actually hold, to a certain extent, closely, loosely, is real. Again and again, it's come up in nature. So what marketing does is it removes that, right? So then it's and we're not good at conceptually going beyond even. I read something, and I'm afraid I don't remember the article, but that 5 is really the number we can quantify, hold as a concept in our brains that's real. Past 5, 10 people, you can hold it there, but they become a little less human, right? Because now it's literally a number. And that's why, charities and things like that will focus on the one child versus talking to you about the 200,000 or the millions, because we lose the importance of the people when there's more, which is kind of crazy, but that's how it is. And marketing is all about volume. A lot of it is, right? It's about getting to more people. And so you lose the humanity just by virtue of how our brains work. So you're constantly having to check in with that and go, these thousands of people, if you're lucky to have thousands of people on your email list or something like that, to remember, they're all individuals. And that's really hard for our brain to do, but you got to keep checking in that way. And I think that's helpful, just to go I'm going to fall and my brain's going to default to the number game, but who am I writing to? Even if you're thinking of that one person, as you've heard people say, write to that one person, but it could actually be a real person. And so I think that's helpful. I know that's a more specific example, but what about you? What do you think?
Well, one, I love that example because I think this is probably the biggest problem in big marketing is that because the reach and everything we're hitting now is numbers that our brain can't understand, can't see how there's a human connection possible in that. And it's been really interesting for me because the past week, I've been on a couple of different live shows and podcasts and stuff, and there are people in the chat who I would not expect to see who are like, Tracy is awesome. And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I know you, right? But you're not in my 150 because my brain can't process that many. And so it's interesting to when we have that intention, of creating to some degree an individualized experience. And I'm not I don't have one-on-one coffee chats with all 8,000 people in my LinkedIn.
Right.
Because one, a lot of them don't want to have that. So that's fine. They self-select out. 2, I have a specific amount of time that is available, and certain people will take me up on the invitation. Certain people will not take me up on the invitation. And there's always kind of this flux
Mhm.
of like, this is my 5 right now, and then this is my 5, and then like, and it can move around. But this is an important thing to remember, especially if you're at that stage where you're having those volume conversations, right? We've got
Mhm.
to a place where we've got the systems and everything to actually scale this, so now we're looking at big numbers. And when you're uh I mean, I'm all about authenticity and brand and brand and connection and those things. Like, it can actually even be hard for me to think about, like, wow, you're reaching this many people, right? Like,
Yeah.
but then I can't serve that many people. I don't want to not be able to serve them, right? And so, what do you see also, Lynn, on the flip side of that? Like, yes, this mindset is empowering, but do you also see it limiting people in terms of their reach?
Yeah. Like the people, yes, definitely. I'm trying to think of like specific examples without naming names, but yeah, it does get tricky because yeah, so you're right. When it comes to delivering, so for example, you create a course, and one of my clients from way back, one of her big things was, but how will people be using it? Will they be doing it? How can we make sure that they're getting the most out of this course? This was a fitness program, and we talked about it a lot, and there are people who help with education and curriculum and ways to get people on, but ultimately it was kind of like, what's our responsibility here, like to each human that buys the product, right? So if it's like a physical product, most marketers, I don't think, worry so much about people using it, in as much as like, oh well, we hope you enjoy it and you'll talk about it and that kind of thing. But when you've created something and it's you and you're giving the course, obviously you keep being involved. So I do think people hold back from selling because they know, like, the more people there are in there, maybe the fewer people will actually end up doing it just by sheer like normal numbers, right?
Mhm.
So there's a bit of a, like, when you keep it intimate, you can follow up, keep track of people, and hopefully support them in that thing. And you can't do that as much in more volume courses. So I think the way that it does hold them back is like, you may not know it consciously right off, but you do try to like pull back a little bit on your marketing when a number gets high, right? Like, actually, when something's getting really well, like, oh, we've got 200 sales, and then you're like, what? Like 200 people? And then, so I think it does impact them that way.
Mhm.
I've seen that happen, which is lovely, because you're still keeping in mind that you want to serve these people. But yeah, it can hamper your ability to give this course to as many people who want it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think too, there's like when I think about marketing that matters, there's an important conversation there, right? Like, is this about like volume? Because it's kind of like, this is a very basic idea. We want it to be as widespread as possible. So it actually is about volume and a lower price point, and that like is in alignment with how we want to serve this, versus high ticket coaching types of things, which are like, yeah, I'm going for like 6 clients a year, right? So if I'm sending out millions of ads, then it's probably not in alignment. And
Yeah.
when I think about marketing that matters, it really is about that alignment. How do we want to sell? Who are we selling to, right? Like, if you're
Mhm.
selling $1 million web design product to a CEO, then digital ads probably going to have like a very small role that
Yeah.
they play, if any, in that sale. And so, in my perspective, I would say in that scenario, the marketing doesn't matter because it doesn't do anything to move the conversation forward.
Mhm.
So, if our goal is to build those types of relationships, how is our marketing contributing to either igniting the relationship or nurturing the relationship? And if it's not, let it go. And I
Mhm.
would say, I mean, Lynn, I think there's people who hear me say that and they're just, because I've had clients where I like look at what they're doing for marketing and I'm like,
Yeah.
you're spending $300,000 a year to do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could stop doing that and be $300,000 more profitable every year. And people look at me like, but I have to do marketing. I mean, if your marketing isn't doing anything, then
Right.
you should stop doing it. Am I like out to lunch with that, or how do you feel about
Well,
it?
yeah, no, I mean, I do think, yeah, so there is a sense of what is marketing first
Mhm.
and foremost, right? So we see a lot of the same things. Marketing is ads, marketing is content. That's a big one, right? Lots of content. Marketing is all that inbound stuff, the stuff that people will just want to come to me because I'm so brilliant and I've shared it, and that kind of thing. And however, marketing is also, as you said, like, it's building the relationship. So many times it's like it doesn't have to be formally structured that way. Like, I know, for example, Rand Fishkin, he's here on LinkedIn, and he'll share some really great videos about, it doesn't have to look the way you think. It can be based on relationships. Like, you can get sponsorships on, that's a bigger thing now, but on other emails, for example. But you do that with an email newsletter that you love, right? And then you approach them, but it's through a relationship. So
Right.
you're wheeling and dealing, yes, but it's through, like, I love your content. Have you thought about sponsors or whatever, So anyways, you could be just doing one or two of these marketing-y type things without doing that whole marketing approach,
Right.
which is more the ads, the funnels, like the content in a certain way. I don't know. I think we do what we see a lot of, and then
Right.
we think we need to do it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, stopping is always an option. I think we had talked about this in Freakonomics. There was that option. This is advertising in particular, but that story in the Freakonomics book where the two Stevens were consulting with I forget what kind of company, but they had ads in newspapers, and they'd always done it that way. And they were like, this is terrible. Like, it's costing you money, especially newspapers. And they did an experiment. They had an experiment, an accidental experiment, because they wouldn't have gone for it. For whatever reason, one region's ads didn't go for like a month. It was one of those, like, somebody dropped the ball, and I could be telling the story completely wrong, but the gist is here. And that market didn't suffer. If anything, it was good. Like, they had the numbers to say, like, you're just spending money for no reason. And they were like, yeah, but we're going to keep doing it because it's what's safe, and it's what, like, they refused even when the numbers were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a in business, there's a feeling of, like, I'm doing business if I'm marketing.
Right.
Like, I'm doing the adult business thing. I have to market. There's that too, right? Like, we need to keep doing those things. I don't know. I've gone off there on a whole other thing,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, I don't think it's a whole other thing, because if we're talking, I mean, our topic for today is marketing that matters,
Yeah.
right? It's not just marketing, because there's lots of things you can do from a marketing perspective, right? And
Mhm.
actually, so let's talk about visibility for a
Right.
bit, Lynn, because I feel like a lot of marketing, especially when you're looking at like a split between marketing and sales, that like marketing is responsible for awareness and visibility, and then it's someone else's problem to like turn that into business. And I feel like that is super dangerous, and also that awareness and visibility are very hard to meaningfully report on.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts in that marketing awareness?
Oh, Lord. Well, I mean, there's my experience in larger corporate and in agencies. That's different. Nobody was accountable for anything in terms of awareness, especially PR. I mean, media to some extent did, but that was based on impressions. It's a very kind of weird thing. Like, oh, we got so many impressions, right? And I don't know, that whole world is a whole other thing. But if I'm thinking more of like the entrepreneurs and founders, visibility, we see those who are most visible, right? Go figure.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of successful people who are not as visible, aren't doing that awareness thing visibly. They are making people aware of them. They're doing a marketing that's more building relationships or whatever, but it's not visible to the public, right? And that can work really well too. And that's a form of marketing. It's just not high visibility. We've kind of fallen in love with the idea of visibility because now it's easier to do. We can get on these lives. We can do these kinds of things. It's definitely not necessary. What was your other part there? You were talking about visibility, awareness, that like yeah. So But doing the work of outbound, which is those sales where the sales and marketing are always like, you're not doing your job, everybody was fighting. You can't not do that. You need to be doing that. And that outbound stuff, the stuff where you're talking to people directly, where you're doing that kind of thing, then when you're marketing, it's time to do marketing, it will work better because you'll actually know things. You'll have talked to people. And many of us didn't do that. We're like, I can just go marketing and say things and people will find me. Maybe, but it might not be the people you want to find you. So again, the outbound to me is you have to do that. The marketing is optional, and that's to a certain extent. Again, you bring on a layer once you've brought that in. So yeah, I'm as a marketer, it's terrible to say, but I would say that's the more optional piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, like, it is a benefit, obviously, to have these two things working in conjunction. But I think that's the key, right? That these are not two separate things that are doing different things. These are two things that are working together. And so if I have salespeople who are out there building relationships and doing the outbound lead hunting, and I have people in my marketing department who can do supportive things, what are supportive things? This is one of the reasons why I love the concept of community, because and even if community isn't monetized, right? Forget a monetized community for right now. This is about a space where people who are interested in your company or personal conversation can come and aggregate and hang out and meet each other and build on that and build a relationship with you. And so they're building a relationship with their salespeople. They're building a relationship with your brand. They see how you do things. Like, how do we do things here? Right?
Yeah.
We care about giving it to you straight, right? Like all of this is wasted. And I could sugarcoat it, or I could just tell you the truth, but that's who I am. And if you don't like that, then like, don't hang out, and that's fine. There's enough people who will like that and will want to hang out. I think too, this also plays into, like, when I think of visibility and awareness, it starts to play back into that game of volume. Right. And I think that then like inherently disconnects us from the person. And at the end of the day, at the end of a sales transaction is a person.
Yeah.
And so if from a marketing perspective, we don't, like you said, then this was great advice, where just like bring ourselves back to like, who are the people at the end of the day that we can help best? And are we having conversations with those people? Is our marketing actually doing what it needs to do to ignite the conversation with those people? Or is it just, we've got all of these metrics that show we have this huge visibility, except nobody's buying anything? So I mean, best case scenario, what that's telling us is we have a lot of visibility with the wrong people, which isn't usually helpful. And if you're spending a lot of money getting visibility with the wrong people, then high five, right? Like, I think marketing metrics have a role to play here in terms of showing us what matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, it's hard to troubleshoot. I think, a lot of the times the problem is more first principle problem. People will try to fix things like the button color, or we should try a different or a different way to say this, or I don't know, like, all these different things, when ultimately it's because you actually don't really understand your position in the market. You don't understand what people are actually getting value, like what they value from what you do. And again, I'm a big fan of April Dunford's, with her positioning, her view on positioning. And marketer, they often talk about brand positioning. I don't know how to put the word brand in front of it, because it's really just like, where can people find you in the world? How do you position yourself? And many people don't go back that far. They think they've figured that out, even though people are dealing in like vague. It's funny how much of the world goes with like, we kind of sort of did it. Now we got to move on to the next step. So let's kind of sort of keep going. And we're building like non-specific over non-specific. So why would we be surprised when the brain, like people's brains are going like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, or I'm not, or I know what you're talking about, but there's nothing for me to care about or do anything about. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of like when my son, I brought him to a math tutor in high school, and it was like one of those tutoring companies. And he said, like, he made the point, the problem is, right, they have a curriculum. So the kids who don't get it, you have to keep moving. So they're building new knowledge on top of, I didn't get this, but now I have to add this. And I still didn't know what that was, but we keep perpetuating it because you have to keep going.
Mhm.
And that's why that tutoring was like, we'll take him back and make and have them understand that thing so that then things make sense. And it reminds me of that. It's like most of the marketing issues and you know, sales and marketing and however it works, you have to kind of come back. It's that you've been super vague.
Yeah.
Or so that's a big problem, volume wise, or even smaller companies.
That's true, because vague is still vague in a small quantity or a big quantity. And I think, Lynn, have you experienced this? Because I see, and maybe it's because we're marketers and we can see what is like specific and what is vague. But I see a lot of people who are like, yeah, this is it. This is we care about people. That's our differentiating factor. And I was like, you know that everyone says that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's possible that that is your differentiating factor. But then, like, how are you demonstrating that? That is true, instead of just saying we care about people, because that's what everybody's saying, right? So when people receive that, and this, I remember thinking this in like my first marketing job when I was 23. People are like, I don't know what to write. And I'm like, well, you're a consumer, right? Like, you consume things, right? So you know what you like, you know what you don't. I feel like I have this conversation like at least 3 times a week about the like pitch slaps on LinkedIn, where people like just connect with you and then pitch you immediately. And you're like, do you like that? Because if you don't like that, why would you do it? And even if someone out there is being like, yes, this is the way to get all of the visibility, okay, sure, you're sending a lot of connection requests, so technically you could count that as visibility.
Right.
But the fact that I have now blocked you like, doesn't help move the business towards a sale, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I've really started to believe that like marketing is sales. Because if marketing isn't doing something that contributes to sales, then what is it doing? It's just being a money suck. And one of the things, I don't know if we talked about this the last time we talked, Lynn, but like one of the things I felt as a marketing employee when I was in corporate was that I am doing all of these things and I'm putting in all of these hours. And there was one time we launched a product, albeit a digital product, in 8 days. 8 days we launched this thing. And like all of us worked for like 24/7 for 8 days. And I don't know if any of it was ever sold.
Oh, right? Wow.
We had a PR strategy and we had all of this graphic design and we had the page on the website and we had all the things. We had checked a lot of boxes. And then when I had left the company, nobody had bought it. And I think, and it had been released for like 6 months. So like that's enough time for if there was a market, like a hankering for that somebody probably would have bought it. But then you get this feeling of like, I'm putting all this work into nothing, just into the void. And like for me, when I was looking at that compared to spending time with my son, which is actually meaningful for me, is a huge contributing factor to why I left, because I want to go and do something that means something to somebody, and not just goes and into the void. Has that been something you experienced as well?
Oh my gosh, of course. It speaks to kind of like there's so many parts of all these systems that are bloated and broken, you know, one of them being product innovation and coming up with new products for companies. Like that's just like, that's what we do. But again, they don't necessarily do it in a way that's like, does anybody really want this? Oh yeah, they will. They'll want this. We need to create it, right? It's like creating things in vacuums. That happens a lot, which is weird. But that's why I like the, and I don't know if you ever had that. I didn't do it in corporate, but later in my research, I like the jobs to be done framework for that reason. And the jobs to be done theory framework is basically about what is the thing that the customer is trying to accomplish? Like, what is it that they want to do versus are they 25 to 45, blah, 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 right? It's more like, what's the job that they're looking to finish to do? So the simple one they always talk about, the example that comes up again and again, is somebody who buys a drill doesn't want to drill. They want a 3-inch, not 3-inch, but whatever, 1/4-inch hole.
That's a big drill, but
right? Or some might say they want to put pictures up, right? So it's like where, and then you break that down and then you can create product. I mean, it's a whole system. I'm not going to go into all of that now, but that's not how most of it works. Most of it is like we have R&D or we have this thing and we have to keep coming up with. CPG was terrible for this, right? Consumer product goods companies, especially because everything's commoditized there. One example I had was when I was in a PR agency was Reckitt. I'm going to call them out. Reckitt Benckiser. They're like they make detergents and things like that. They're like a smaller, say, P&G or whatever. And they had a dishwashing detergent. It was like the size of a beer cozy thing, like a cup, and there were 12 washes on this thing, but it took up the like a glass, the space of a glass. And so they were like, you put that in and 12 washes, and you don't have to. And I thought, wow, because it's so hard. Because now at this point, we don't even put powder in that container. We just put a pod in and, there's your, and I was sitting in that brainstorm and I thought, it's not recyclable. This is not something we need. And I actually left the brainstorm because I'm like, I don't want to be helping this. This is ridiculous. It wasn't my job anyway. I was just there for extra. And it didn't go to market in the end, but they did spend a lot of money with our agency, with other agencies, because look, we created this thing.
Right.
So anyways, all that to say, a lot of the issues also comes with, is your thing solving a problem? Is it something people really need and want? And a lot of, unfortunately, not just like entrepreneurs, but a lot of even companies are creating stuff we definitely don't need or want.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to leave AI out of it for today because we can go on a whole rant about AI, but this is how I feel about a lot of the marketing AI. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is about going back to the volume thing, right? Like our problem is that we can't create enough content. So we'll use the AI to create more content and then it'll fix our problem. Well, if the AI is informed based on your old content and your old content wasn't working, then what kind of content do you think it's going to generate? Mm-hmm. Same old content that isn't working.
Yeah, it's not magically going to know your position and give you a good message. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And the best case you're going to get is like a global average, because if AI is like informed on a large language model, then it has a whole bunch of information about people that aren't your target audience that are being fed into your marketing, which isn't helpful. And I think it's just these types of things that when we think about them, when we take a minute and we're like, we don't have to launch this in 8 days. If we think this is actually something that people want to buy, why do we think that? Right? It's because we talked to this person or we talked to this person. Okay, great. Like those people should be clients then, right? It's like, is sales talking to them right now? Or are they just like floating around and like, how did we get that feedback? Do we have a relationship with them? Or this is something I see like quite often when people like pivot. Software companies can easily pivot because a lot of the stuff they do is based on code, and like good coders can code a lot of things. But if what you're selling is custom, then like, how are you showing people that, right? Because you like literally can create anything. And so like, yeah, you could go to market and be like, we can create anything. But then like, I don't know how I can use that. Right? So there's just, I think, okay, let's talk about ego. Let's talk about ego and marketing for a little bit, because we both talked about like things that people continue to do even though they don't work, and how much of this is ego related. Because I got to believe that if it's not actually contributing to the business making money, it's one of two things. Either we don't have the data to show us that it's not contributing to anything, so we guess that it's doing something, or we are too attached to what we've always done, We've always done newspaper advertising. And it's really our ego that says, no, we can't let this go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some of that. There's definitely variables. I think part of it is change is hard, right? That's not more than ego, but as well as ego. Anytime we're looking at like these bigger changes, like fight or flight, our systems just go like, oh God, like, when they roll out a new something in the office, everybody's like, oh, I was just getting used to the other thing. Like we're in constant flux. So I think that's just kind of like a normal resistance, and when people say, oh, I love change or whatever, it's change that you consciously make or that kind of thing. But there's so much change coming at you. So there's that. I think that resistance makes a whole lot of sense. So let's just keep doing things the same way. It keeps like it helps me be able to do the other things that are really stressful. So there's that. And then in terms of ego, I mean, I do think that the systems have kind of run off. They have a life of their own, right? Like we don't ever talk about real reform, if you want to call it that, reform or revolution in the way we do corporate, right? So these 4-hour work weeks and these and things that change with employees and remote work or whatever, that's reform, yes, but it's not. Like the deeper first principles of the system, like I said, they're broken. And it's really hard to make. So it's hard to make change 5 levels above. Can you imagine if anybody ever said, this is why it kills me when startups don't create something new. We keep falling back on the corporate models, those hierarchies, those things that we've always seen, because it's hard to innovate. It's hard to do things differently. So that's one thing. It's just you kind of like push and push. And then at one point you're like, well, this was already done. No need to reinvent the wheel. We'll just keep doing it that way. No harm, no foul. Totally get that. Then in terms of ego, of course, that plays a huge, huge part. And again, that's baked into the system because you reward people based on, oh, you look good if you're doing these things in the system. So I'm going to keep doing those things, and it is going to feed my ego, my status, so yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because when I think about some of these corporate structures, like the 9-to-5 workday, this like the hierarchy of like, I manage this many people. I remember somebody telling me they managed 150 people, and I was like, it's just not a thing, right? There's no way you're actively managing 150 people. You couldn't possibly do that. Yeah. So even if it was your like full-time job, you could maybe do 50, right? So like we create these structures, and again, for like one of my favorite types of small business to work with are people who like don't care, right? Like, you know what? We need to like reassign resources and put them in a different way and do different things. Like, okay, let's figure out how to make that work because we're not connected to this hierarchy. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know where it works. Right? I feel like people have individual skills, whether that's marketing skills, sales skills, operational skills. And when you get people in the right seats on the bus because you're paying attention to like a seat I need, the number of people I talk to who are hiring a marketing coordinator for mostly no reason at all, and you're going to pay them full time to do mostly nothing. Yeah. In terms of results for your business, you also have to look at like, how does that employee feel coming to work and not creating any results for people? There's a huge people component in this. And when we think about marketing, we do tend to think about advertising and budgets and visibility and likes and comments and shares and like all of the numbers, which are like easy because our platforms now just give us those numbers. So it's nice. How many views did I get on this blog post? Like it's nice to know it, but if you have somebody writing your blog post who hates writing blog posts and sees that every blog post that they write gets 4 views from internal employees, right? Like I feel like that can only last for so long. And we're going to get to the place where both of us got to, and we were like, this isn't good enough, right? I gotta go find something more meaningful than this.
I know. And the meaningful piece is is a real bummer. I mean, it's good when you can find it. And again, meaning, you know, when people think about meaning, I've thought about this. It's like, what's meaningful? And the way that I could make something meaningful in those jobs was what matters? How can I make this matter? And it's the people that mattered. So I'm working with a team. What matters to me is that they don't get screwed because I've decided I don't like doing blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not going to do that. However, the meaning was still really difficult because to your point, like, I'm like, why are we even doing this? You know? And, so yeah, and again, it, like, I know I'm harping on this, but it does come down to what we're giving people. Like, I'm going to get this marketing coordinator, they're going to figure things out, but you're giving me such vague nothing. Like, it's not even building blocks, it's like goo. It's just this generic bullshit, and you expect me to create like something that looks like blocks, and I you're not giving them to me. So yeah, a good marketer can see that and will do the work to, but a coordinator, that's not up to them to do that. This is a much more, like, you know, experienced person would do it, but even they would struggle with that. So yeah, what you're doing is you're getting them to play with the vague.
Yeah.
So where are you going to find meaning in that?
Yeah. And I mean, even in that, I think there are people who love to play with vague, right? Like, oh, this is vague and it's my job to like figure it out, right? To create structure out of this. But that is also a different thing than saying, here, take this vague and make it visible on the internet.
Make it not like, make it great, like, make people interested.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it really just comes down to, and businesses at the base level are people as well. I actually have a friend, Lindsay Harlkadatz, who has a podcast called Businesses Are People Too. And there's like this, a business and a brand is its DNA is influenced by the people that work there. And if different people go and work there, the brand DNA will evolve. And that's not necessarily good or bad. It just shows you that your people are contributing to the DNA. And so if you have these people resources and you have a thing you want to sell, then it seems like the most logical thing to do is align those two things. We have these people, they have these skills, this is the knowledge they have. Maybe we have knowledge gaps, right? Maybe we want to hire an advisor or a consultant in that arena. And then the point is to get it to market. And to get it to market doesn't mean that you have a website where people can buy stuff. It means that people are buying stuff. Mm-hmm. And if people aren't buying stuff, folks, you have a problem with your marketing. And if you're not looking at that, then the likelihood of you creating marketing that matters is mostly non-existent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the marketing that matters hinges on, you need to know what matters about what you're doing. And, you know, saying that you want to, like, whatever these vague statements are of like wanting to empower people to live better lives, it's lovely, but what about that? Like, you could say, well, that matters, but it's like, no, really, what matters about how you're doing it, what you're doing? Again, it's the differentiation. What's the position? What's the meaning of what you're doing? And I think, again, we do gloss over, and that's also a factor of communication. Words are tricky. Words, big concepts. I think we maybe talked about that, and I've said this before, but we deal in things that we're not really clear on, right? We say things like the economy and society. And when you sit down and go like, what the heck is the economy? You know, you can go look at a bunch of definitions, but we're dealing in proxies. We are like, that's when we're talking, that's what we're doing. So we keep doing that in our marketing because that's how we do things. That's how we discuss. But that's why the marketing that matters, again, has that. Your job with marketing that matters is really about that the people, how you communicate to make it meaningful. And to do that and to make it matter, it needs to be specific. So you actually need to do that really hard work. It hurts the brain, honestly. I have not gotten to a place where I'm doing even like what I would say a great job. I'm improving every day, but I keep forcing myself, because what you don't see a lot is really good examples, right? It's always the same damn 20 examples of the same 20 freaking companies. It's like you'd think those are the only ones that ever existed. So why is that? It's because we're not doing that work of really talking about, I don't want to call it a case study, but in that way, like, let's take a look and let's be specific.
Yeah.
So communication, that's a big part of it. It's like, words are hard.
Well, and this is I do this no pitch networking event, and earlier this week I was like, oh, how many definitions of networking can I find? And on page 1 of Google, 13 different definitions of networking, all of them different, right? And like, this is because everybody has like a little bit different relationship with it. And if I was creating my definition, it would be a little bit different of yours. And when I say marketing, it means different things to me than it means to other people. And we don't normally take that step back and say, like, what does this mean to me? What does, like, from a CEO perspective, what does marketing mean to me? Is that what my marketing team is actually doing? Right? Yeah. What does marketing mean to them? Do we even have the same definition of what marketing is? It's a good place to start. And there's not that there's like one or right definition, but when you can get alignment on those things as a team, and you can be like, this is our definition. This is our definition of what it looks like to care about people. Let me show you what it looks like for me to care about people. This is my definition of quality. Let me show you what quality feels like.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's somebody's responsibility to make that available externally in a marketing capacity, how are they supposed to do that if they don't know what that is? What is visibility? What is awareness? Right? Yeah. And why is it meaningful? And maybe even just like start with those conversations. We have these KPIs. How is this meaningful?
Exactly. We're not great at that, right? Because the world is moving so fast, and it feels like we don't have the time to go and like be, you know, esoteric or weird about these things. We just got to move, you know, we'll figure it out as we go. Again, it's like that math tutoring thing. Yeah, but this shit compounds. Like, it starts to like get gooier and genericer and whatever, as I'm making up words now. But
genericer. I like
genericer. But yeah, this is it, is to, okay, let's take a step back. Let's talk about, and it's very difficult to agree. I think also the key is to keep it as simple as possible, right? Don't have a sentence that goes on for 5 so that you're trying to capture everything. And like you said, an example, like, what do we mean by quality, right? Do we mean something that lasts? Do we mean something that makes somebody feel good? Like, is it luxury? Again, look at all these things and then highlight. For us, it's these 2 or 3 main things.
Right.
So we'll let that guide us. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do that work. Again, it's easy enough to point this out, but with the crazy ass systems that we have, it's very difficult to do. That's why with entrepreneurship and people creating their own companies and doing their own businesses, I'm like, do it. Do that work. Take the time. Don't have to replicate the goo.
Like, let's not create a machine that just generates a bunch of goo. Let's generate a machine that actually generates business instead of goo. That would be great. Unless you're selling goo. I don't know. There was a whole time where like kids and like time was like a very big thing. But I think this is kind of the crux of it, right? Is that I think a lot of marketing is overcomplicated from the beginning, right? And we're like, okay, we need to have a website and we need to have social media profiles, and our people got to show up on social media, and we got to have a podcast, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have ads. And then you're like, okay, like, but how is all this connected? Oh no, we didn't talk about how it's connected. We just have all the things.
Yeah.
That's fine. I've worked in marketing teams with like 50 people in the marketing team, right? And like nobody, like, we're all here doing things, but like I'm doing direct marketing and I don't know what's going on in newspaper, and I don't know when the flyer drops are, and I don't know what's happening on TV. So like, how can I really, like, I can only create in a silo. So I can't possibly create a scenario where all of these things are connected, because we're not trying to keep it connected. Versus if you're like, this is who we are as a business. We are Apple, and we are about innovation, and we are about innovation through community, and that's it, right? And like, we think about, I use Disney as an example a lot because Disney is about magic, and they made it about magic from the beginning, right? This is supposed to feel magical, and this is what they do, right? They create their entire strategy. Maybe not so much anymore because it's a really established company, but
Right.
at the beginning, there wasn't anybody. I've actually seen people being interviewed for jobs at Disney, and it's like nothing I've ever heard before, because it's all about your capable, like, how much do you believe that you are capable of creating magic for people? That is
Right.
your number one job here, whether you are sweeping the grounds or you are selling in the gift shop or you are a character or you are a CEO, right?
Right.
What's your ability to create magic for people? And every business has that thing. And it's not that the concept of creating magic is unique, right? Like, there's magicians and there's lots of concepts of magic. They defined their version of magic. They created their version of magic. They systematized their version of magic, and now have a huge global organization. And we look at these things and then we're like, okay, well, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to copy exactly the way Disney did it. But you can't do that because
Right.
their essence is different than your essence. You need to base it on your essence. And if you use that, tap into your unique fuel to build the things, then yes, we're like, yes, please. That is how your company is going to become the next Virgin. And instead of you just, and this is equally relevant for entrepreneurs too. The number of entrepreneurs I talk to who have tried like 5 or 6 different types of businesses because someone says, like, this is the easiest thing that you can
Yeah.
do from home. And you're like, I want to work from home because I'm a mom or I have a chronic illness or for what, like, good reasons, right? But then I'm trying to do something that I don't care about doing.
Mhm.
And it's not sustainable. It's not scalable.
Yeah.
Nothing that's not sustainable is not scalable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we need to tap into those things, and those things are core foundational things. And you can build stuff on top of not the core foundation, but it's
Yeah.
going to be the math tutor scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, there are people who do great work with what they're given. And there's in advertising, when I was in advertising, that the creativity blew my mind. Like, there was some really there's great work, there's great stuff being done, even when things are unclear. But with specific clients, generally it wasn't. They would get pretty specific, but so it can work, obviously. But I'm thinking more like at the genesis, or like what we're saying, like when you're marketing, when you haven't done that work of establishing and the foundations, like you just said, then you're just, you're rolling, like you're running in the hamster wheel. You're not getting anywhere with that. But yeah, it's not I have to do marketing.
Right.
Like, I need a door on my house. It's not the
Right.
same, right?
Yeah.
It's more, what do I want to accomplish? And do I need to do that? Because I know people who do really well and do very little what we would call marketing.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And that, I mean, we're running out of time today, so we're not going to go off on another new tangent. But these are, again, when you look at your definition of what these things are, right? Like, what is marketing to you? For me, marketing is about storytelling. And so theoretically, for me, anytime I come on a live or anytime I have a coffee chat and I get to tell a story, that is marketing, and not marketing for a transaction, but marketing for the perspective of, like, people know me and people
Yeah.
know what I do. And maybe you need that today. I don't know. You decide, right? Like, I don't decide. Oh, I do want to touch on this quickly, Lynn, because I thought about it a couple of times and it just came back. This concept of like marketing as a persuader versus marketing as, like, I like to look at marketing as an invitation, right? Like, this is what we do, this is how we help, these are the problems we talk about, and marketing is an invitation into the conversation. That's how I like to look at it. But there's a lot of people who think marketing is about manipulation and persuasion, and if that's your definition, then you would look at me and be like, you're using every one of your coffee chats for marketing? No, because I don't consider it transaction related. I consider it awareness and visibility related.
Mhm.
So just quickly, what are your experiences or thoughts on that, like marketing as a persuasion tool?
Well, I mean, for the most part, that's what it is. For the most part, that's how it's approached. Especially when yeah, when there's a certain amount of growth that's needed, when numbers are attached, when metrics are attached. Um, you do play in the persuasion, the place where you can be like, okay, if we have scarcity, if we have if we do the pricing this way, if we change it this way, if we use these words, if
If we
whatever,
agitate your problem, this is
yeah,
a thing I hate.
we know that it works. And my job is to grow the company. So am I really going to be disrupting right now and say, like, let's not do it that way? Right. So I get that that's why it's being done. Hence why we were also like, oh, I don't really want to play this game anymore. So it's a lot of that. It's what can we do to persuade people? It doesn't have to be, but it is a lot of that. I think when we're talking smaller companies that have the ability to be more nimble and to do these things, it can be and again, it's knowing, like, we don't need to keep growing, like, numbers wise. Like, here's what we need as a company, here's how much is enough. And once you have that, you can do the kind of marketing that isn't as, like, built on persuasion, and to your point, is more about, here we are, here's my specific message, here's the specific thing I have to offer, here's what I can do for you. There's nothing wrong with that. Please do share that. Not enough people do in a good way. But you don't have to use persuasion tactics, but you are still trying to persuade people. I mean, I don't think that ever goes away. Like, even in a conversation, if I have something that I want to get across, I'm trying to persuade you that I've, made a good argument, or that whatever. So there's levels of it, of course, but we're probably talking more about, the kind of influence, the Cialdini and the persuasion kind of stuff. I'm no expert on it, but I don't think it's necessarily terrible. It's just when we take it to the numbers extreme, again, losing the humanity, going, I need to meet these numbers, so I'm just going to use these tactics. That's when it's not great.
Yeah. And I think that's when it comes back to the people too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have a whole bunch of people leaving your organization because they don't feel comfortable with those types of tactics. I know I've been in coaching programs where they promote those types of things, and I was just like, I would never do that.
Yeah. And you don't need to.
Right. And I've always said, like, I will never do closed cart, right? Like, you can buy until midnight tonight and then you lost your chance. Like, I will never do that because that feels terrible for me. And this is why there's such a huge benefit in finding, I would know, not finding, because it will not manifest itself, creating time within your marketing conversations to just have that conversation. Like, how do people feel about going to market this way? Are you proud? Are you excited to, like, share that this is a project that you launched? Like, if you are putting 8 days into launch, like 8 full days in a row, not sleeping. Well, there was a little bit of sleep, but like into launching something, and you're just like, meh, right? Like, how many times are you going to get behind that before you don't do it anymore? And when we can find the place and to have those conversations, actually listen to the experiences of our people, then I think we have a greater opportunity to do marketing that matters.
Yeah.
So with that, we ran out of time because that's what we do on this show. Lynn, if there's people in the audience who are interested in learning more about your experience and how you help small businesses and startups now, where is the best place for them to find you?
Well, here on LinkedIn, or I don't know if you're streaming anywhere else.
We are streaming in lots of places.
Right, but LinkedIn is where I hang out. I have been kind of taking a bit of a break, but it's Lynn Rivest, Rivest, which I think is down here. And then just on my website, minimalistbiz.com, where you can sign up for my weekly Sunday newsletter. That's the best way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us today. Thank you to Amber and Brian and Nathan in the chat. It was great to see you all in the conversation today. And for those of you who are watching the replay, or for those of you who are already in the chat, please connect with each other. Connect with me, connect with Lynn. These are people who are interested and or extremely passionate about marketing that matters, and we would be super happy to help you start the conversation or continue the conversation so that in the world we get to have more marketing that matters for people. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing all your expertise today. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.